Hey everybody! Thank you so much to everybody who came out to Crime Con. We just got back, and it was amazeballs. You can probably see I've got a little bit of the remnants from Joker Dahmer. And we had a great time. It was so cool to connect with all of you guys, and I can't wait for next year. You guys are all awesome. The reason though that I wanted to make this video, and if you went to the Crime Con, then I bet you're gonna be like, oh, is he talking about what I think he's talking about? Yup. We did a panel at Crime Con that was sort of about true crime, what it's like to run a true crime comedy podcast. Sort of can true crime and comedy intersect and, create something interesting. And it was a very, very interesting discussion. It was just me and the other hosts of the show. And I am trying not to be on a true crime comedy podcast myself for what I'm about to do to the person in that truck who keeps backing up and making it beep incessantly. Okay. So we were, sort of having the discussion, and I was dressed as Joker Dahmer, and we were, sort of yucking it up and being silly, and we were having a good time. And then at the end of the discussion, it came time for the Q&A, which is something called a question and answer. So that's basically when people can ask questions, which is the Q, and then we will answer the questions. So typically we do it at the end of every live show, and this will be going up on the Spotify. Once Eddie finishes editing the episode, our editor, then you guys will be able to hear this discussion. And I think it was a pretty good discussion. I mean, at the end, the sort of got a little dicey with what happened at the end, but basically, we were yucking it up, Joker Dahmer, and then we said it's time for the Q&A, question and answer. So I usually for the question and answer, I try to call on people who aren't necessarily. There are two trucks now. There are two of the same truck. One's back there, one's up here, that keep backing up. What are they doing? What could they possibly be doing? Two of the exact same trucks. And also, why the fuck do they need to have a beeping sound? If they're big enough to need a beeping sound when they back up, we can see it. I want to know if any person genuinely thinks their life was saved by somebody backing up and having the beep sound there. I want to know if there's a single person on this fucking planet who would have gotten hit by a truck if they had not heard the beeping sound. Is there anyone for whom that is true? So at the end of the Q&A, a lady basically raised her hand. And for the Q&A, I tend to, it's no secret that all of us hosts are white men and most of our fans are white men. We do have some, it's just that, it's kind of like when I look in the crowd, I feel like I'm looking out at I'm looking into a jar of mayonnaise, So I usually try to look for anybody who's not that to call on for the Q&A, because that way, people don't think that the only people who are there are white people and, white men and all that. We're trying to keep up good optics, and they usually have a pretty good perspective. So typically, if I see an old person or I see somebody who's a different race, then I'll call on them because. Did you see how fast that guy was going? That's the other one of the... What is going on here? Why are they going so fast? And why did he almost hit me? And why does he keep backing up? What is going on here? This is kind of scary. I have never felt welcome in this neighborhood. Ever. I got the cops called on me the other day in this neighborhood just for sitting in my car. Something's going on. So I saw that there was an old woman in the crowd. So she raised her hand, and asked a question, and I called on her. And she said, "Hi, my name is," I don't want to say her name, but basically, because I don't want to give her any more of the attention that she was so clearly seeking. But basically she said, and I have no way of verifying whether or not any of this information was actually true. She said all of this, but I don't know if it was, people can say whatever they want. She could have just been some homeless freak who wandered in off the streets of Seattle, because we were in Seattle. So that's basically like if a discarded heroin needle was a city, it could have just been some homeless junkie crackhead freak who wandered in off the streets, started making up insane ramblings, but basically she started going off about how, my name is such and such, and my daughter, you covered my daughter's murder. And I was like, with a blanket, what are you talking about? And she said, no, you covered her murder on an episode of Murder Boys, which, that's the name of our podcast. I'm sure you guys don't need to know that, but Murder Boys with a Z, by the way. We get a lot of people who spell it wrong when they search it, and they spell it with an S, and it's with a Z. We did spell it with an S for the first season, but then we thought it would be funnier if we spelled it with a Z for the second season. So we're trying to get that fixed with Spotify, and we've told them just put it on the same, because right now the way that it works is you have to go to Murder Boys with an S to get the first season, and then you have to go to Murder Boys with a Z to get the seasons 2 through 20. So we're trying to get that fixed, and I don't know why nobody at Spotify will answer us. Apple Podcast does it fine. So anyway, she said you covered my daughter's murder on an episode of Murder Boys, and I was like, with a blanket. And then everybody laughed at that one, which I was like, okay, I guess that was funny, and then I said, no, what episode was it? And she said it was the one where you talked about the murderer's name, which I don't even remember, honestly. And I was like, huh? Because when she said it, I was like, vaguely I remember that, but we've been doing this podcast for 10 to 12 years, I think it's been 12. So the fact that, 12 years of Murder Boys, I don't remember every single, there's been almost 1,000 episodes. So I don't remember, and so I said, well, do you remember the number of the episode? And she was like, no, I don't. I just know, my friend sent it to me because you're one of the only podcasts who has covered this murder, and so I said, well, thank you, I appreciate that, because that's sort of what we try to, I think that's one of the reasons why we've gotten popular. We're sort of willing to, honestly, part of it was out of necessity, because when we started off, season 1 of Murder Boys, it was sort of like, we were back in the S days, feels like a lifetime ago, but we were sort of doing, the greatest hits, Dahmer, Bundy, the Hillside Stranglers, and then that stuff's easy to laugh at because it's, everybody's heard of it. It's so popular, you can get away with murder talking about those guys literally. Well, not literally, but they could get away with murder for a long time, but we can sort of get away with murder in a comedy sense, because those guys are so popular, and they're fun guys, they're fun characters, so that's fun. But then 12 years, going on 10-12 years, there's only so many people who have ever been murdered, so eventually you got to start going to the kind of the bottom of the barrel, and I hate to say it like that, but murders that we sort of maybe season 1 through 5 said, oh, this might be a little not funny, or maybe this is too recent, or this is boring. A lot of times the murders are boring. I mean, it's like somebody get, a husband was drunk and then stabbed his wife. When the hell is that? That's not exactly gonna win best screenplay. I mean, it's tragic, of course, but we try to look for things that have a little bit more, just a little bit of a 3-act structure, things that are going to be interesting for the listeners. And unfortunately, we've sort of gotten to a point where we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, because now we've had to go towards things that are sort of boring. And, we try to juice it up as much as we can, while still honoring the memory of the victims. And that's the whole thing that I've said this entire time that we've been doing the podcast. I always tell everybody, okay, so basically the woman at the Q&A alleged that her daughter was Nancy Fucks or what, sorry, that was disrespectful. But she basically said that my daughter was one of the murders that you covered. And I was like, with a blanket. And then, I said, no, and then she sort of got to the point more, and she said, because I said, do you have a question? Because it sounds like you just are doing a therapy session. And I understand that some, basically you have, what I want to say about that, I think that I was a little bit callous towards this woman. And basically the reason why that was the case was because I sort of cut my teeth, in the Brooklyn stand-up scene, kind of doing open mics, getting drunk people throwing beer bottles at my head, and calling me, they used to call me gay boy, so they'd say, hey, gay boy, and they'd say even worse things that, I don't even want to say on here, but that was the sort of the thing that I would deal with. And so being a stand-up comedian, you have to sort of learn to have thick skin, and you also gotta, punch back. When people start heckling you, you've got to sort of be like, oh, well, you're ugly, or something. I don't know. So you get into that sort of ping pong mindset, right? So when people are talking to me on stage, I inhabit sort of a sassy kind of character, so I say, because people like that. People that think that's funny, especially live. So I'll say, like, well, do you have a question, or what's your question, sweetheart, or something like that. I'm sort of the sassy one, and then Rob does more the brainiac, he's sort of the brainiac, and then Phil's the big fat guy, so we sort of have that sort of on stage dynamic. So anyway, I'm sort of the sassy guy, so I was sort of being like, oh, well, do you what, what's, and then Rob started to say, well, and he's the kind of the brainiac, he's got the glasses, so he was saying, well, let's let her talk, ask a question, and she started talking about this, the fact that we covered her daughter's murder on the show, and I was saying, I don't really remember that, and I was like, was that a Patreon exclusive episode, or what the hell are you talking about? And then she sort of got to because I was sort of saying, like, okay, well, that's time's up. And she was like, and then I realized that she was crying out in the audience. And so I was like, oh boy, So she said, losing my daughter. And she was holding the microphone really, really close to her mouth. So it was like, boom, and feedback. And I was trying to be like, but pull the microphone back from your mouth, but that's not what that looks like, obviously. So I was trying to go like pull the microphone back, but it looked like I was doing this anyway. Then I realized that she was crying, and she said, losing my daughter was the light is gone from my life. And I was like, okay, I think you stole that from, J. Edgar Hoover. What's this fuck? Wasn't there a president? That's a quote from a president. So I was like, I think you stole that from, who's the president who said that? Theodore Roosevelt? Somebody tell me in the comments. It feels like this truck has been going forward and back in the exact same spot for the past 15 minutes. Anyway, she was crying, and she said, my daughter was the light of my life, and now she's gone. And do you think that's funny? Do you think that, how do you expect me to sit here and laugh while you guys talk about people's children, people's wives, people's loved ones who were taken from this world? How's that funny to you? You know, and it was getting kind of morose in the room. You know, so I was sort of trying to think about how to lighten the mood up a little bit. So I sort of took the microphone and went, you know, did a little fake fart sound, you know, and that's sort of I'm sort of Mr. Fart, you know. That's what they've called me in some of my, it makes me laugh even just thinking about it, Mr. Fart. You know. But anyway, that's just sort of, you know, so I sort of lighten the mood. And here's the thing. That's sort of a microcosm of what, you know, that stuff sort of, I think the whole point can be summarized in that little thing. Because the reason why we developed gallows humor, because we all have gallows humor, you know, and all of our listeners do, is because we have seen that darkness, you know. We've seen that pain. And then I told her, I started this after I did the Mr. Fart bit. Then I went into sort of, you know, talking about, my dog, Bluebell. And I said, I just miss her so much. And I think about her running down the I used to throw a football at her, and she would go like, you know, chase the football. But losing Bluebell was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and it was horrible. And the only way that I got through it was the guy who hit her with his car was of a certain, basically, I had the only way that I got through it was I used to sort of make fun of his accent. And I, you know, because when afterwards he was talking to me about it, and he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he had a really thick accent that I don't want to imitate now, because you can't do that, because that's not politically correct. But, you know, and of course, in the moment, I was like, oh my gosh, crying. But then afterwards, I remembered, I was like, man, that was funny, the way the guy said, like, oh, I'm so sorry that I hit your dog. But it was in this crazy, you know, funny foreign accent. Now they are backing up and going forth the same house. Anyway, long story short, basically, you just sort of have those things. So I was telling her, listen, when my dog died, the only way that I got through it was laughter and humor. So that's how we have sort of learned to cope with things. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and you know, that's sort of how we learn to cope with the tragedy of life. We have sort of gallows humor. And what I try to have in the forefront of my mind, there are two golden rules when it comes to making a true crime comedy podcast that I have developed, and we have them printed out, hanging on the wall, you know, all big. The first one is how does it go? 1 death is a tragedy, 1,000,000 is a statistic. You know, and Edgar Hemingway or whoever said that, Ernest Hemingway. Because that really, we found really is true. Because when we're trying to figure out a murder to do for the show, a lot of times what tends to happen is, let's say it's a hate crime. For a while we had a no hate crime rule because hate crimes aren't funny, you know. But then, you know, as we started running out of things, we had to sort of nudge that a little bit, and we started to say, Okay, well, no hate crimes that were on the basis of race, but we'll do the other ones, you know. And then it was, okay, well, no hate crimes that are on the basis of certain races, you know. And we started to do those. And then we said, okay, well, we'll do a hate crime if it was over 5 people, you know, because of the quote. If a lot of people died, people care less, you know, because for exactly what the quote says, you can't really imagine all of that in your head at the same time, right? So you have to sort of, you know, but we have found that people laugh more at tragedies that were higher body count, you know, and people sort of want that. You know, when we've, you know, a lot of times when we post episodes and it's like, oh, this guy was a serial killer, he killed 3 people. Everybody's like, boo, you know, let's skate. I want something more fucked up. That's what people always say. We're like, I'm sorry, but I mean, you know, I guess if you want to get out there and start killing people, then we'll cover you, you know, and you can make it funny. You know, you can wear a sombrero or something, you know. Anyway, I feel like I sort of got lost in the weeds here. I really don't know what the hell I was going to... But yeah, basically, I think that the only thing that I really wanted to emphasize was we are very careful. So when we're writing episodes and when we're improvising a joke, and then when Eddie is editing the episode, our editor, we sort of say and this is the other one we have printed out big in the room. Next to 1 million deaths is a statistic, 1 million is a whatever. Then we have this other one, which is, would the victims, we ask ourselves, would the victim's family think this is funny? If we said this to the victim's family, this joke that we have, would they laugh? And if the answer is maybe, then we say it and it goes in, you know, because of that whole Gallows humor principle. And, you know, it's sort of a generalization. I mean, some people are more okay with certain types of humor than others, you know. So Miss, you know, the lady who was at the Q&A, you know, I mean, we didn't know that she had a stick up her fucking ass, you know. But we sort of have to approximate, like, you know, we can't always sort of defer to the weakest link in the fence. I don't even know. You know, what do they say when it's like, if somebody's, we can't go for the most sensitive person in our audience. We shouldn't go for the least sensitive person in our audience. You know, we need to sort of shoot for the middle. So, you know, I mean, yeah, she's probably very sensitive, but that's fine. So that's some people's sensibilities. Don't listen to the show. And that was what I ended up telling her. If you don't like the show, don't listen to it. It's not hard. And that's what I always think about with our haters. Why are you watching this? Why are you listening to this if you don't like it? Because you, on some level, you do. That's the only explanation I can think of. You know, if your daughter's death was such a damn tragedy, why are you going to listen to the Murder Boys episode about it? You know? It just doesn't make sense. You know, frankly, it's not for you. You know, we have a certain demographic and she's not in it. You know, if I wanted to make podcasts for old ladies, I would have made a podcast called Tea and Strumpets with Dan, you know, or Doilies and Duckies. That's pretty good. Doilies and Duckies. That could be like a where we have tea and we talk about ducks or something. That could be interesting. Yeah, so I don't know. Sorry, I'm still thinking about doilies and duckies. I'm gonna have to call Eddie. Wonder if that's already taken. Okay. Well, yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know. I hope you have a great... Thanks for coming to CrimeCon. 9/11 Part 3 will be out tomorrow, so wait for that. That's a very good one. I was really on a roll that day. when we recorded it, not on 9/11. I wasn't alive. No, I was. But I was barely alive because I was in kindergarten. And that's sort of what I talk about in the episode. I talk about sort of my drama with 9/11 and how my father, you know, always said that he wished he had died in 9/11 because he hated raising me so much. Okay, have a great day.